The situation surrounding Mitch McConnell increasingly resembles a train that has gone off the rails. The official statements from McConnell's office insisting that he is alive have not aligned with President Trump's own remarks, in which he admitted that he did not know the senator's current condition.
So, have you
spoken to Senator Mitch McConnell since it's on?
No, I have.
How's he doing?
I have no idea.
I
have no idea how he's doing.
And the more I piece together the available information, the more it feels like I'm looking at a puzzle with several critical pieces still missing, and one filled with contradictions. The last time the public saw Mitch McConnell on camera was on June 9th, when he spoke during a Senate committee hearing. Just days later, reports emerged that he had suffered cardiac arrest and was found unconscious at his home. From that moment on, one of America's most influential politicians virtually disappeared from public view. McConnell's office has maintained that he is receiving treatment at a hospital, that his condition is improving, and that he continues to work remotely with the help of his staff. On the surface, that explanation sounds perfectly reasonable. But the more you think about it, the harder it becomes to ignore the inconsistencies. If his health is genuinely improving, why hasn't there been a single recent photograph, a brief video, or even a few seconds of footage released to reassure the public? In an age when anyone can record and share video with nothing more than a smartphone, the only updates regarding Mitch McConnell have come in the form of written statements from his office. Then, just as questions were beginning to grow, another unusual detail surfaced. The Hill, one of Washington's best-known political news outlets with an extensive network of sources inside the nation's capital, accidentally exposed a pre-written obituary for Mitch McConnell. To be clear, it is standard journalistic practice for major news organizations to prepare advance obituaries for prominent public figures, and the existence of such a draft is not by itself evidence that anything has happened. However, the fact that it surfaced precisely when McConnell had vanished from public life inevitably fueled speculation. Was it simply an unfortunate coincidence, or nothing more than an editorial mistake? No one can say for certain. But the timing made the story far more difficult to dismiss. If that had been the only unusual development, public attention might have faded quickly. Instead, another piece of the puzzle emerged. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, the governor of the state McConnell represents in the Senate, publicly acknowledged that he did not know the senator's current condition. Beshear even sent a formal letter to McConnell's office, requesting a clear update on his health, emphasizing that elected officials have a responsibility to be transparent about whether they remain capable of carrying out their duties. At that point, the issue was no longer simply about wishing someone a speedy recovery. It suggested that even officials operating close to the political system were struggling to obtain reliable information.
So,
Have you spoken to Senator Mitch McConnell since it's on?
No, I have.
How's he doing?
I have no idea. I have no idea how he's doing.
The story became even more puzzling when President Donald Trump was asked about Mitch McConnell. His response caught many people off guard. Trump said he did not know McConnell's current condition and revealed that he had not spoken with the senator at any point since McConnell was hospitalized nearly a month earlier. That detail alone raised eyebrows. Here was a man who had led Senate Republicans for years and remained one of the most influential figures in the party. Yet even the president could not say with confidence how he was doing. That fact does not prove any particular theory, but it does highlight just how little verified public information exists about McConnell's condition. Then another figure entered the picture, Scott Jennings, a CNN political commentator, a Kentucky native, and a longtime Republican with close ties to McConnell.
Talk about what did he say?
Yeah, he called me this morning before I did my radio show. We talked for about 17 minutes. He talked a lot about the situation with Iran. Talk a little bit about Ukraine and what's going on in Europe. I told him I'd been to the Teddy Roosevelt Library. We talked a little bit about the history of the vice presidency and how Roosevelt had transformed that in the modern presidency. A little history of the Senate. It was a wide-ranging conversation. I talked to him often. I hadn't talked to him since he'd been in. I'd gotten a few text messages from him, but I hadn't spoken to him. So it was good to hear his voice. Voice sounded strong. And
Jennings said he had recently spent about 17 minutes on the phone with the senator. According to Jennings, the conversation covered a wide range of topics, including Iran, Ukraine, developments in Europe, a visit to the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library, the history of the vice presidency, and even the history of the U.S. Senate. Jennings said McConnell sounded strong, remained well-informed about current events, and simply described himself as doing fine. Ironically, that account raised more questions than it answered. Over the past several years, the public has repeatedly witnessed episodes that appeared to show McConnell struggling with serious health issues. On multiple occasions, he froze unexpectedly during press conferences, standing silently for extended periods without responding to reporters' questions. At other times, he appeared to require assistance while walking. Those incidents were recorded in public and widely documented. Against that backdrop, hearing about a nearly 20-minute conversation that effortlessly moved from geopolitics to American history and complex foreign policy issues naturally strikes many people as surprising. Could Jennings's account be entirely accurate? Absolutely. There is nothing inherently impossible about the conversation taking place exactly as he described it. But when placed alongside everything the public has witnessed in recent years, many people are left wondering why the two pictures appear so dramatically different. That is where the real contradiction emerges. On one side, there have been weeks without a single verified photograph or video showing Mitch McConnell. On the other, there are assurances from a longtime friend who says they had an extended, perfectly normal conversation. In any investigation, eyewitness testimony matters, but testimony remains testimony. The simplest way to put an end to the speculation would be remarkably easy. McConnell could appear on camera for 30 seconds, or his office could release a brief, recently recorded video from the hospital. That alone would likely silence most of the rumors. Yet, as of now, neither has happened. That is why the most intriguing part of this story is not what Scott Jennings has said, but what Mitch McConnell's office has chosen not to do. In modern political communications, silence can sometimes generate more questions than any official statement. And the longer that information vacuum persists, the more people are inclined to fill it with their own theories. To be clear, I am not claiming that Mitch McConnell has died, is in a coma, or is no longer capable of performing his duties. There is no publicly available evidence supporting any of those conclusions. At the same time, however, it is difficult to ignore that his prolonged absence, the complete lack of independently verified images, and the tightly controlled flow of information from his office have created an atmosphere of uncertainty. In any investigation, when straightforward questions remain unanswered, the story rarely comes to an end. Perhaps the greatest mystery is no longer McConnell's health itself, but why, in Washington, a city where information often spreads within minutes, the disappearance of one of the Senate's most powerful figures has continued for so long without a publicly convincing explanation. And if the earlier developments were already difficult to reconcile, what followed only made the picture even more complicated. While the public continued waiting for a photograph or a direct statement from Mitch McConnell, something remarkable was happening on Capitol Hill. It was not only President Donald Trump who acknowledged having little knowledge of McConnell's condition. Several Republican lawmakers admitted they also did not know exactly what was happening. One of them was Representative Marlin Stutzman of Indiana. When a reporter asked him directly, "Do you know for certain that Mitch McConnell is still alive?" Stutzman's answer consisted of a single word: no. He explained that what he had heard from acquaintances suggested McConnell was facing a very serious medical situation. But whether the senator was alive, had passed away, or remained in some other condition, Stutzman said he had no first-hand information to confirm any of it. In his view, this was no longer merely a private medical matter. McConnell is still Kentucky's elected U.S. senator, and the people of Kentucky have a legitimate interest in knowing whether the person they elected is still capable of carrying out the responsibilities of the office. Is he in a coma? Is he being kept alive with life support equipment? Or is he conscious but unable for some reason to appear publicly? Those questions have all been raised, yet none has received an official answer. Then, just as those questions continued to spread, another senior Republican stepped forward with a reassuring message. Senate Majority Leader John Thune, who has worked closely with McConnell for many years, said he had spoken directly with him by telephone just 2 days earlier. According to Thune's office, the conversation was lengthy and covered several important issues, including matters of national security. At that point, a clear pattern began to emerge. First it was Scott Jennings, now it was John Thune. Both insisted they had recently held long, ordinary, and completely natural conversations with Mitch McConnell. Yet the one thing the public still had not seen was also the simplest: a recent photograph, a brief video, or a direct appearance by McConnell himself. That contrast is precisely what makes the story so difficult to explain. The more people come forward saying they have spoken with McConnell, the more one obvious question continues to surface. If he is healthy enough to spend extended periods discussing geopolitics, American history, and national security, why not appear before a camera for 30 seconds and put an end to the speculation once and for all? Again, I am not suggesting that Scott Jennings or John Thune are being dishonest. Their conversations may well have taken place exactly as described. But in any investigation, when multiple witness accounts exist while direct visual evidence remains entirely absent, it is reasonable for questions to persist. Meanwhile, another line of inquiry has begun attracting public attention, one involving McConnell's wife, Elaine Chao. According to information discussed during the program, journalists attempted to cross-reference multiple sources, including 911 emergency dispatch records. Those records reportedly indicate that at approximately 8:30 a.m. on June 14th, emergency responders received a call reporting that Mitch McConnell was in cardiac arrest. Paramedics were dispatched to the scene and reportedly performed CPR. Some reports have further suggested that the first people to discover the emergency may have been members of the U.S. Capitol Police or McConnell's security detail. However, these details are based on information cited during the program and have not been officially confirmed by the relevant authorities. What drew even more attention, however, was not the emergency call itself, but Elaine Chao's travel schedule. According to the program, Chao had already planned a trip to China to attend an event in Shanghai, honoring the school her father attended decades ago. She departed on June 12th. 2 days later, her husband reportedly suffered a serious medical emergency. For most people, the natural reaction when a spouse is facing a life-threatening medical crisis would be to return home as quickly as possible. Yet, according to the program, Chao continued with her planned itinerary in China, and several days later, even met with a Chinese vice president before eventually returning to the United States. That detail alone leaves room for multiple interpretations. It is entirely possible that she received private information indicating her husband's condition had stabilized. It is also possible that diplomatic or security considerations made an immediate return impossible. But because the public has not been given the full context, that information gap has inevitably fueled further speculation. Another detail that caught people's attention was the timeline itself. According to the program, the medical emergency occurred on June 14th. Yet the very next day, John Thune said he had just spoken with Mitch McConnell. Scott Jennings later described his own nearly 20-minute phone conversation with the senator. These dates do not prove that anything unusual occurred, but they naturally lead many people to ask how McConnell's recovery actually unfolded, and why every update has come through someone else's account rather than from McConnell himself. Perhaps that is the central question underlying this entire story. If Mitch McConnell is alert enough to discuss politics and national security during multiple extended phone conversations, then what is preventing him from appearing in a brief video message to reassure the people he represents? Just a few seconds on camera would likely be enough to put most of the speculation to rest. Instead, the public has heard only second-hand assurances from political allies, while direct evidence remains completely absent. It is precisely that imbalance that has left many observers feeling that the pieces of the puzzle still do not quite fit together. Toward the end of the program, the host briefly lightened the mood with a joke. Pretending to answer a ringing phone, he said, "Sorry everyone, I think I've got a call coming in. Oh wow, it's Senator Mitch McConnell." He then joked that McConnell was calling to remind viewers to like the program, subscribe to the channel, and leave a 5-star rating. Moments later, he laughed and acknowledged that the entire exchange was fictional, meant only to ease the tension. But within seconds, he returned to a more serious tone. According to the host, what makes this story so unusual is not any single piece of information, but the fact that so many small details still leave significant questions unanswered. Elaine Chao's travel schedule, the phone conversations described by multiple prominent figures, the complete absence of any recent public images or videos of McConnell, and the prolonged silence from his office all resemble pieces of a puzzle that sit side by side without quite forming a complete picture. The host also emphasized that he did not want to be seen as promoting conspiracy theories and was not asserting any particular claim about Mitch McConnell's condition. His point was simply that when straightforward questions remain unanswered, the public has every right to continue asking them. And perhaps the most noteworthy aspect of this entire story is not what people already know, but what has yet to be publicly verified. Is all of this simply the result of protecting the privacy of an elderly public official during a medical crisis? Or is there something else that has yet to come to light? For now, those questions remain unanswered, and only time, and verifiable evidence that may emerge in the future, will determine the answer.